I have been thinking about doing a video on this for a long time because this idea has such broad application and yet such depth to it as well. This idea literally serves as the philosophical bedrock of my entire life. And I mean that at the level of how I think about what I want out of life in terms of its general direction, what outcomes I want in the long term, down to the level of what am I thinking about before and during situations in my life that I would regard as high stakes, a job interview, a debate, a date. I'm going to give an overview of the idea, starting with a brutally practical and narrow example with a help from a skit from Family Guy. And then I'll spin off some other examples and ramp up the complexity until you see the abstraction in its broader totality. Here's the idea stated in its simplest and therefore somewhat useless form. That which is pursued cannot ensue. This idea was articulated to me in its full form by Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychologist who survived multiple years in the concentration camps, and wrote what I think is one of the best-selling books of all time, Man's Search for Meaning. What this phrase means, that which is pursued cannot ensue, is that anytime you desire a particular outcome, which is literally every moment of your life, because by definition, every action you take is consciously or unconsciously striving towards a specific outcome, then the best way, and more importantly, oftentimes the only way to achieve that desired outcome is to subordinate it to a transcendent goal. What does this mean? Let me start with this example illustrated with a Family Guy skit. You know when you get a flash of light in your eye and you get an eye floater? You'll notice the more you try and look at that eye floater, the less likely you are to get it into your vision.
Do it, Joe, because if you gotta work here any longer, you're gonna feel smaller than my eye floaters. There's one now. I can never look at it dead on. It's always trying to get away. Hey, eye floater.
Hi.
Hey, where you going?
Away from your pupil.
Well, maybe I'll look over here.
I'll go over here.
You got an answer for everything, don't you?
Okay, so if the outcome you are seeking is to have the eye floater be in your vision, the more you try and pursue that outcome outright by looking at the eye floater, the less likely you are to achieve it. However, if you subordinate that goal of trying to see the eye floater to the goal of staring at the center of your vision, you'll notice that the more you focus on the center of your visual field, the more the eye floater will enter your vision on its own accord. So let me connect this analogy directly to Viktor Frankl's words. For reference, Frankl refers to the human desire for a particular outcome as pleasure seeking, or the pleasure principle. So you get dopamine when you achieve a valued goal. That's what gives you pleasure when you get an acceptance letter to a college you want to get into. So we normally don't use pleasure in that broad of a term, but that's how he's using it here. So you need to understand that. Here's Frankl in his own words. It is my contention that, in the final analysis, the pleasure principle is self-defeating. The more one aims at pleasure, the more his aim is missed. In other words, the very pursuit of happiness is what thwarts it. Normally, pleasure is never the goal of human strivings, but rather is and must remain, in effect, more specifically, the side effect of attaining a goal. In other words, if there is a reason for happiness, happiness ensues automatically and spontaneously, as it were. And one of the crucial things here is that this is not just some sort of conventional wisdom that you can apply in your own life. This is an observation about the neurological reality surrounding the mechanisms for goal seeking and meaning and pleasure. In fact, here's a fun example that Frankl uses to demonstrate the idea. This self-defeating quality of pleasure seeking accounts for many sexual neuroses. Time and again, the psychiatrist is in a position to witness how both orgasm and potency are impaired by being made the target of intention. So fellas, you know when you are trying to impress a girl and you really want to perform well, you might know, not that this ever happened to me, I'm just hearing this anecdotally, but the more you focus on the performance itself, oftentimes the less likely that the performance will be any good. Whereas if you contrast that to, you're just chilling on the couch watching a TV show on Netflix or something, and it's spontaneous, it's just in the moment, well, it's a little bit of a different story. If you subordinate the pursuit of performance to the broader transcendent goal of relaxation and comfort and just being with the person that you're with, then the spontaneity and the happiness can ensue on its own. Here's another example. Let's say you're hosting a party and you really want everyone at that party to have fun. That's a reasonable outcome to desire. But the more you focus on that somewhat nebulous goal of have fun, have fun, have fun, the more that becomes the focus of your intention and the less likely it is to ensue.
Gunther, where are you going?
I was sort of thinking about maybe...
No, you can't go. No, this is fun. Come on, we're just getting started. Here's your marker.
So if you subordinate the goal of having fun to a transcendent goal of playing a game, for example, a board game like Settlers of Catan, the more you focus on playing that game and getting really into it, the more fun you have. And you'll notice that charismatic people at social gatherings are often the kind of people who get really into whatever the game or the subject matter at hand is, because it encourages everyone else to get to buy into it. And when I was like 18 or 19, maybe I would have thought, playing board games, that's kind of weird. And now I realize, oh, this is why adults, 30-year-olds and all that shit do that all the time, because it's way more fun to have an arbitrary game to play that facilitates and allows conversation and camaraderie and all that to ensue around it. Another example is if you want to meet new people by, let's say, going to the bar. You don't go to the bar across the street to make friends. That would be a nice outcome that could ensue. You should go to the bar or the coffee shop with the intention of doing something, reading a book, watching a sports game that's on TV. And then your interest in whatever you're doing might attract people to ask you, oh, what are you reading? Oh, are you a Bears fan too? And then that outcome that you want, by not focusing on that and focusing on something else, will actually end up ensuing on its own. If you're an artist or you do creative work, you might particularly enjoy this explanation from CJ the X, in which he basically articulates this idea.
That's the real dream, right? To have an excited, authentically engaged audience independent of their interest in your personal well-being. You don't want to invent the TikTok dance to your own song. You want people to love the song and to make the TikTok dance of their own accord. Keep your horse cart orientation in check. You don't want a million views. You want to make something excellent, and excellent things sometimes get a million views. There is a morally superior temporal orientation and value hierarchy here. First, good art, then material gain, whatever the fuck might follow, and it might not follow. Supreme is good art. If you find yourself in a position where you're just trying to chase the signifiers of good art, views and accolades, whatever the hell you're looking for, you're lost in the sauce. You're lost in the sauce. You're lost in the sauce.
If you don't got no sauce, then you're lost. But you can also get lost in the sauce.
So an obvious question that arises out of all this is, how do I know which pursuit I should subordinate my desired outcome to? Right? Because like if the outcome you want is to get a job, you can't just say, oh, well, I need to pursue something else that's not getting a job exactly, so I'll just sit home and eat Totino's pizza rolls all day. The outcome that you desire must be subordinated to a transcendent goal that has a causal relationship to the outcome itself. So if the outcome you want is to get a job, you should pursue, for example, the development of an in-demand skill. And by pursuing that and focusing your attention on that goal, the demand for that skill will cause you to get a job as an ensuing outcome. It's very dangerous to pursue a transcendent goal that has no causal relationship to the outcome you desire.
But you can also get lost in the sauce.
For example, and I see this all the time, there are a ton of young men who would like to be in a relationship, and they recognize that if you want to be in a relationship, you should be probably fit and healthy, because anyone of any sex desires their partner to be physically fit. But I swear to God, it's probably 20 to 50% of everyone who goes to the gym like every day. They think that getting big muscles and looking really good is a transcendent goal that will lead to the outcome of, having happiness or being in a relationship or attracting women. That is one element to the equation, but if you think that the pursuit of getting big muscles will solve all your problems, you will go mad and pursue what is ultimately an empty end that has no relationship to the desired outcome you seek. And here is where I want to provide you with what I call the ultimate cop-out in life, the ultimate application of this philosophical concept as an intersection between Frankl's philosophy and more Eastern Buddhist philosophy. No matter what situation you find yourself in, if you can learn to subordinate whatever outcome you want to a single pursuit, you'll be able to succeed in ways that others can't. The pursuit that you should always look for, no matter what you do, no matter what situation you find yourself in, is to always learn something. So if you go into a job interview that you really want and you're like, man, my life will change if I get this job, wrong. You want to go into that job interview with one intention. I want to go into it. Obviously, you're going to try and do your best, but your goal is to learn something for application in the future. Not to get a job, but to learn something. If you're going to go on a date, you obviously want to spark good conversation and all that, but you shouldn't be, I'm not trying to impress this person. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm simply trying to have a conversation and take genuine interest in what this person has to say. And the reason this works, I think, is because the kind of person who is always interested in learning from his or her experiences has a level of charisma that you can detect in people's body language and how they direct their attention and whatnot. So from the people side of things, you'll get outcomes that you desire. And then obviously the desire to learn and facilitate skills and develop your experiences is something that will allow you to succeed in the world in general. Now, I may ruin this entire video by bringing up this example, but I debated Vaush, a big left-wing YouTuber, and to the degree that it went well from my perspective, which I think it did based on his reaction at the end.
But with Paul, My man's actually a guy, like a person, you know? And quite emotive too, which I actually find very charming.
It was a function of not coming in to, quote unquote, win the debate and win an instant victory or something in the moment. I went in specifically to just talk to the real human being and have a conversation and just genuinely air my disagreements as such. And I don't think it's a coincidence that many of Vaush's viewers came in and said, hey, they really appreciated the positive disposition I had towards him. And I think that was the right move in a lot of ways. Now, only time will tell, but that is an example of me applying that philosophy in sort of a high-stakes situation. So with all that being said, I hope you can subordinate yourself to something higher. Maybe get high. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Anyway, good luck and Godspeed.